Quorum is present. I want everyone to know, first of all, welcome to today's Public Health Committee meeting. We're looking forward to hearing from all of you today. I know you have some impactful testimony to share with us, and we're looking forward to the opportunity to hear that. We are expecting a relatively lengthy meeting, so we ask for your patience as we work through it. Not everyone can go first, and someone will have to go last. And so we will try to be fair in the way we order the testimony today. I will remind you that if you plan to, we will be taking public testimony, and if you plan to testify, please fill out the affirmation form on the registration kiosk out in the hallway. They're located in the hallways here around the committee room. So please do that. You will not be able to testify if you have not done that. Members, welcome back. We're looking forward to a robust discussion today. And with that,
all right, the chair lays out House Bill 5. The chair recognizes Chair Van Dever to explain the bill.
thank you. Members, House Bill 5 is a new subject for this committee, although not a new subject in the legislature. I'm going to give you a little background. My layout is going to be much more lengthy than a normal layout for me because typically I prefer a very short layout, but because of the history behind where we are today and the fact that this committee has not heard testimony up to this point on this subject, I believe it would be helpful, I hope it's helpful for me to provide a little more of a historical context of what got us here, and then actually lay out House Bill 5 for you as we consider that as the piece of legislation before us today. What started this, I believe, at least in modern times, was when Congress passed the Agricultural Improvement Act of 2018, the Farm Bill, and that removed hemp from the list of controlled substances and allowed its production and sales. And the bill allowed states to adopt their own plans to regulate hemp production subject to the USDA approval. And the bill removed hemp from the Drug Enforcement Administration's list of Schedule I controlled substances, effectively legalizing its production in the United States. The Farm Bill from 2018 defined hemp as cannabis with a THC concentration of 0.3% or less on a dry weight basis. Cannabis exceeding this level remains classified as marijuana, a Schedule I controlled substance. Prior to the changes made in the Farm Bill in 2018 and House Bill 1325 in the 86, prosecution of marijuana offenses was based on the amount of product someone had in their possession. After these bills passed, prosecutors were faced with trying to determine if a product was below the 0.3% concentration to be hemp or whether the amount was above 0.3% concentration to be marijuana. Many prosecutors across Texas dropped prosecuting these offenses and actually dismissed pending charges in cases involving products determined to be hemp. The then director of the Texas Department of Public Safety is quoted as saying that initially some labs were unable to test because the labs did not have the proper equipment to determine the THC concentration of the plant. He went on to say state labs will not be testing misdemeanor marijuana possession cases. So then in 2019, this body, some of us on this dais were a part of this, passed House Bill 1325 in response to the Federal Farm Bill of 2018 that defined hemp as cannabis with THC concentration of 0.3% or less. The bill analysis for House Bill 1325, known as the Hemp Farming Act, said its intent was to open up a new agriculture market for Texas farmers because hemp is a viable agricultural crop and an agricultural commodity for hemp, food and fiber products, and a statewide regulated market. Unfortunately, the bill's original intent was not realized. An illicit market quickly sprung up to fill an unintended void since House Bill 1325 did not set regulatory guardrails on the sale and availability of hemp products. This new market has grown over the last 5 years and is reported to have at least 8,000 retail stores in Texas selling hemp products. There have been countless reports of artificial and synthetic cannabinoids and their effects on the consumer, These products have become easily accessible at corner stores, liquor stores, vape shops, and THC stores. Some of these products are marketed in a way that is attractive to children or resemble other common food products like candy. So now I would like to lay out for you what House Bill 5 does. That is kind of what got us here. So House Bill 5 seeks to stop the unregulated THC industry by banning all THC products outside the Texas Compassionate Use Program. In addition to banning all THC, other than non-intoxicating CBD and CBG, HB 5 tightens the regulations on the manufacturing and sale of CBD and CBG to ensure these products are not harmful to Texans. Testing of these products will be regulated by the Department of State Health Services and will include a process to determine the total concentration of THC in the product. Additionally, HB 5 is creating a strong regulation and fees for those entities that would like to manufacture or sell the products. The property owners of these entities will be required to consent to allowing local law enforcement on the property for physical inspection of hemp products being sold. HB 5 requires any business processing or manufacturing consumable hemp products to pay a $10,000 per year per location licensing fee. This manufacturing and processing facilities are prohibited from manufacturing a consumable hemp product that contains any amount of the cannabinoid other than CBG or CBD. House Bill 5 requires any location selling non-intoxicating consumable hemp products containing CBG or CBD to pay a $20,000 per year per location licensing fee. Under House Bill 5, DSHS will create a product registration that will require any product to be approved by the department before the product can be marketed to consumers. Product registration will cost $500 per product. This bill creates several safeguards aimed at ensuring that hemp is not being marketed toward children. Members, that is a quick layout of House Bill 5. I say quick, not all that quick, I suppose, but I would be happy to open for questions among the committee members. We have some invited witnesses here, some resource witnesses who can certainly help answer any questions we might have. But members, anything before we move into the testimony? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Chairman. Okay, we'll begin with our first panel of invited testimony. Chair calls Steve Dye, Brian Hawthorne, Dr. Peter Stout, and Alice Amelhat. Is this room set up and ready? Yes. I will also let you know that we do have an overflow room for anyone who would like to use that. E2026 will be our overflow room if you would like to go there and wait for your time to testify. Okay, I have Steve Dye. I have you, Steve Dye, the Chief of Police for Texas Police Chiefs Association, testifying on behalf of the Texas Police Chiefs Association and yourself, and you are testifying for House Bill 5. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Okay, please proceed.
Well, good morning, Chair Van Dever, committee members. As the chair mentioned, my name is Steve Dye. I'm here representing the Texas Police Chiefs Association and our approximately 1,700 members, and I'm testifying today in support of House Bill 5. On behalf of the Texas Police Chiefs, we want to thank the House for your thoughtful consideration in previously passing a ban on THC consumables in the regular session under Senate Bill 3. TPCA looks forward to the continued civil discourse and governing process as we work together to try to protect the health and safety of all of our communities. On a regular basis, validated research continues to be published verifying the fact that these THC consumables are extremely harmful, particularly to our younger populations. Our local engagement with our communities continues to find significant concerns about the proliferation of these businesses and accessibility of these products in all of our communities throughout the state. Some citizens remain uneducated, still thinking that these THC consumables are the marijuana of the 70s with a THC concentration of less than 5%. Nothing could be further from the truth. The products that we've tested contain dangerous chemicals, metals, and have tested up to 80% THC concentration and beyond. As you know, the regulation of these businesses continues to be a topic of discussion. TPCA studied regulation and found it to not be achievable. We must ask ourselves why we're evaluating an expansive regulatory program for a very small segment of our population that seeks to buy these intoxicants and to help syndicates profit billions of dollars. The regulation measures in House Bill 5 cover our farmers. And by the way, all of this legislation intended for farmers, only 182 acres are being farmed in Texas for hemp out of 125 million farming acres. I think everyone would agree that regulation without enforcement is meaningless because it would be impossible to enforce. This is exactly why the hemp industry wants regulation. It will keep the same people in business that have been selling illegal products for the last 6 years. Very few people are purchasing THC products under 0.3%. That's why the wholesalers and the retailers are profiting based on only selling intoxicating hemp for the most part. As a result, under regulation, these businesses would continue to thrive, and it would create the largest THC recreational market in Texas that would exist in the United States. More specifically, TPCA believes that effective regulation is unattainable for the following reasons. To regulate an industry, the industry partner must be credible. The consumable THC industry over the last 6 years as a whole has proven to be not trustworthy by selling many illegal products. Since 2019, when the industry arose in Texas through this loophole, Texas has not been able to effectively regulate 8,500 retail locations and a small number of hemp farmers. It would take decades and millions of dollars to hire enough agents and train them in chemistry, potency thresholds, lab testing, and labeling compliance, and they will never be able to keep pace with the volume of the retailers, wholesalers, shippers, and producers. When police departments cannot even fill their vacancies with higher salaries, how are we to expect that these enforcement regulatory positions would be filled at a lower salary? Regulation would be seen by the industry as legalization, and the number of retail locations would certainly increase. They're already aware that oversight into their products in this state is unattainable and that we would never be able to keep pace with their growth. THC products will continue to be produced out of state, where Texas has no oversight authority in the production and manufacturing and quality control. TABC does not have adequate resources currently to handle their existing 60,000+ alcohol retailers, only having to test one product metric at this time, which is alcohol by volume. Unlike THC consumables, retail liquor products are tested by major companies who follow strict guidelines to ensure quality control and that the contents of their products actually match what's written on the label. Regulation would still require a quantitative test for DPS labs, and they are currently unable to handle their current workload. Money for private labs and that testing would continue to be yet another expense and layer of oversight. DPS already struggles to keep pace with evidence processing for other criminal cases. Increasing the number of lab reports for THC products would only be an impediment to our other criminal cases for our crime victims. A retail-based registry under regulation would struggle to keep up to date as the industry is regularly changing the cannabinoids. For these reasons and others, we are confident that even a well-intentioned regulatory program in Texas would result in the same outcome as legalization. These THC products are intoxicating, and yet another issue dropped on the doorstep of law enforcement. Over the last 2 decades, we've also been encumbered with other societal problems, and it's hard for us to keep up. This would be yet another duty and another task for which we do not have the personnel or the resources. These products are resulting in more intoxicated drivers on our roadways, and we do not have an accurate means of determining legal intoxication for those who choose to drive while high. Daily, our officers are responding to calls around the state of Texas involving juveniles who have ingested these potent products, which is causing and devastating problems to many families. In addition to the health and safety concerns, our ongoing criminal investigations have discovered that millions of unexplained dollars are flowing through these establishments, and money is going to regions in the world and countries that are of significant concern to the national security of the United States. As a reminder, TPC advocated for moving first-time possession from a felony to a misdemeanor. We also advocated for House Bill 46, which provided more access to licensed physicians for those with legitimate medical issues through the Texas Compassionate Use Program. Self-medication never solves a problem. Moving forward, and in a continued effort to collaborate, TPCA recommends the following be excluded from the ban: licensed hemp farmers, FDA-approved THC over-the-counter and prescription drugs, and interstate transportation, all of which is included in House Bill 5. It is the professional opinion of the Texas Police Chiefs Association that no amount of personnel or resources in a state this large with thousands of locations will ever be able to protect the health and safety of our citizens from these dangerous products. A ban would not include, as mentioned by the chair, legal CBD or CBG. Many states, including some legalized marijuana states, have already banned these THC consumables, and the federal government is currently considering a ban as well. Those states are now exporting their products into Texas. We have found no states who have administered a successful regulation program as we've studied the other states in the union. The only thing that has changed since the House passed Senate Bill 3 banning THC consumables is more evidence evolving that these products are very harmful to one's health. Cannabis-related incidents reported to poison control centers have sharply increased from about 930 cases in 2009 to over 22,000 cases last year. A vote for regulation is 100% a vote for the legalization of recreational marijuana in Texas. Their business model will not work if they sell only THC products less than 0.3%. Some say this is a hard decision, but as you study the facts of these products, it really becomes an easy decision. And committee members, I think we're at a defining point. Are we going to tell our children and grandchildren that we stood up to protect their health and safety and the prosperity of all Texans? Or did we acquiesce to the hemp industry desensitizing us to profit billions of dollars with many proceeds going outside of our country? As I close, you're going to watch a video that shows you that these stores know what they're selling is intoxicating, that the label does not match the content of the product being consumed, that clerks will even coach consumers on how to avoid detection by the police because they know their products are illegal. This video is from 3 random stores in 3 random cities in North Texas. So I can tell you this is the same thing that's happening in the stores in your neighborhoods. Thank you very much, and I believe Alex is going to play the video for us.
I'm just looking to get high. Are the waxes, is that going to be like the best option for that?
Oh my God, you're going straight to the wax? You'll die.
I'll die?
You feel like dying.
Really?
You're straight doing the wax?
Yeah, I heard it was good.
Who the fuck told you that? You're straight jumping to a wax?
Not a good option.
For real?
Why is that
You
not good?
kidding me? You're a beginner, right?
What?
You're a beginner.
Yeah, yeah,
Come in, and you're gonna start off with that wax.
yeah.
You kidding me?
Okay.
Oh my God.
So not a good option? Okay.
He's a beginner but wants to start with the wax.
With wax? I mean, I had tolerance.
Stop.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I hope they had tolerance. I would go with the wax, but
He's the beginner.
Why do you like the wax?
Huh?
Is the high better? Like, I don't know.
Wax is chemically formed from the buds, and it's way
yeah, that's all extract.
One
Oh, is
one
That is it.
than the flowers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I get the flowers myself, and yeah, sometimes it's a hit or miss.
But if I was beginner, I wouldn't start with the dabs.
How long is that high gonna last me?
It might give you a bad trip too.
That trip?
Warning you.
I don't know about that. But I never had
Actually, I have done all the stuff here,
Have you?
whatever is present in here.
Okay. So how good is the high on that?
Pretty good.
Pretty good? Like, how long does it last?
7 years.
6 or 7 hours? Perfect. What do you have that's gonna get me? I guess the highest?
Which one? In terms of what?
Her
Flowers, vape THC.
dabs are good. Yeah.
You know that already?
Well, I don't. That's just what a buddy was telling me. How long does that high last on those?
It's, I don't know, it's 3 grams, big quantity.
Okay. Basically, looking for the one that's gonna give me the highest. I don't know.
Okay, I get what you're saying. Well, if we're gonna do that, then you're looking for the ones that have like a good concentration of HHC, because that's one of the main components in euphoria whenever it comes to getting.
Okay. Does this stuff compare to probably the stuff like I tried in Colorado? Like, I mean,
It is very strong. This
Yes.
one, I mean, this one is one of the strongest. I mean,
okay.
you will be extremely high.
Okay. All right. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So cash or card?
Cash, please.
Oh, cash. Oh, sorry. Cash. You need invoice or without invoice? It's up to you.
I'll do it with.
Then
Why not?
some or without.
I'll do it with. That's fine.
It's if you need the receipt, 77.92.
Okay.
If you don't want the receipt, it's 72 only.
Oh, with no receipt, it's cheaper.
With Uncle Sam or without Uncle Sam? What do you want? That's up to you.
Let's do it without the receipt. then.
Without Uncle
If you're new to this,
Yeah.
sure you want to start with dab?
Yeah. I mean, should I not?
Well, I would say if you are new, then like start with maybe like herbal, too. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Okay.
before you move up, the dab is incredibly strong. It's good, but it can take you by surprise. So either start in very small quantities.
Okay.
I'm talking like incredibly, like maybe just like a point, you know, like something about the size of a little bigger than the head of a pen.
Oh, that's small?
Yeah, just to
Okay.
kind of ease yourself. If you're this is like your first time,
Yeah.
I'm serious.
How do I?
So,
Do you have anything that's stronger than that?
have you tried the FEKDs? I like those a lot.
I have not. Yeah.
So this wax right here, I like it a lot. I've had some from Colorado, and I did a comparison, and this one actually hits a lot better.
Okay. But like I could hit this like once or twice and get a good high from it.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's some good shit.
Okay. And these are how much though? Like the what's the one you said FEKD?
The FEKDs, those are gonna be 3.5 grams for $44.99.
So same price, but this one hits harder.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that then. So I've heard recently that if I get stopped with like something like this and have a receipt,
You'll be okay.
then I'll be okay. But if I don't, then I could get.
They don't know if it's going to be either THCA or if it's going to be real THC. Especially with concentrate like this, they are very particular about it, very cautious about it. I would say if you're going to be riding around with it, only do what you know you're going to smoke that day.
Oh, okay.
Like, don't ride around with the whole.
Don't take the whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you didn't see that last slide long enough, all of those products tested in the 70 percentages for THC concentration. We had those purchased and tested.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chief Dye. Members, we will ask questions of this entire panel once we give each member of the panel an opportunity to provide their testimony. Chair recognizes Brian Hawthorne, testifying as on behalf of the Sheriff's Association of Texas and yourself, and you're testifying for House Bill 5. Is that correct?
That is correct, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. You may proceed.
Chairman, thank you. Good morning, members of the committee. I think this is extremely important that we're here for the purpose of public health. And I think that video that we just saw from Chief Dye's group really explains why we are in the Public Health Committee. My name is Brian Hawthorne, and I'm the elected sheriff of Chambers County and the current president of the Sheriff's Association of Texas, commonly known as the SAT. I'm here today representing both myself and the Sheriff's Association of Texas. I'm testifying in support of Senate Bill 5. And I think it's important for you all to know that we have an 11-member board of directors, and we had a unanimous vote for me to be here at the state capitol testifying in favor of the ban of THC. Over the last three decades, I can recall at least two major drug crises in this state: the homemade methamphetamine of the late 90s and the early 2000s, and the spice and K2 bath salt approximately a decade ago. Today's proliferation of high-potency marijuana products all over our streets is now the crisis of today. Members, we learn the hard way with those drug crises that we cannot chase after the attempts to regulate individual products, compounds, or concentrates every session, because the illicit drug makers of the drug always are more nimble than the legislative process. And when I say illicit drug makers, in this case, I mean the ones in Oklahoma, Colorado, California, and other states that are filling our shelves with illegal cannabis products for the last 6 years. Sheriffs understand there is a market for intoxicating products, but those products they are falsely labeling as hemp are actually marijuana. If you get any intoxicating effects, it is not legal hemp. My staff has purchased these products over the counter in uniform, and the DPS lab has confirmed it is marijuana being sold in the stores in my county and in your county. And it isn't old school marijuana. The potency of today's cannabis flower and the concentrates far exceed the weed of my generation. The weed, the Mexican sinsemilla, had a THC potency of around 4%. The THC potency of today's cannabis products exceeds 50%, as you have just heard Chief Dye speak of them at 70%. Which is more than 1,000% more potent than what you and I know as the old reefer. Many people claim a regulated THC market would work similar to a regulated alcohol market. That analogy is misconceived. There is no limit on alcohol by volume. It can be as low or high as the manufacturer desires. The only restriction is when and where it can be sold. Now imagine if the law said that it was to limit a 3% alcohol by volume for any lawful product. Do you really think there wouldn't be an illicit beverage that would be available at 5%, 10%, and higher? TABC would have to test thousands of samples per year to effectively regulate that market. Thousands of hours, millions of dollars, and how effective would you think that would really be? Successful regulation requires an industry that is willing to be regulated and willing to follow the law. The recreational cannabis industry has proven over the last 6 years that it will violate every law, rule, and regulation that it can get away with. One based here in Austin is already advertising on social media how to circumvent the SB 2024 law that you all just passed this last session. And it is not just one or two bad actors. You should have a photograph in front of you. That is a criminal case that my office is actually working. a man smuggling 7 kilos of cartel cocaine and 960 grams of THC cigarettes, both hidden in the walls of the panel van. So if you think that this market isn't cartel and regulated by the Mexican cartel cocaine and Chinese syndicate, which is commonly being managed and run out of Oklahoma, over time will likely all discover that the vape shops around the state are tied to the Middle Eastern money laundering. Make no mistake, recreational marijuana market, the market that some members and state leaders aspire to regulate, is infiltrated by organized crime. That is why we believe THC regulation will fail. In closing, the state and some of the leadership that are looking for the blueprint or guide to the states like Colorado, Illinois, Virginia, and California, their state and local officials will speak to the continuing harms of such regulations as brought to their state. I would welcome you to show me somebody in any of those states that can show the positive effects of what has taken place in the regulation of cannabis. Regulation is recreation. Do not turn Texas green, and that is your sheriff asking you that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff. Chair recognizes Peter Stout, President of the Texas Association of Crime Lab Directors, testifying on behalf of the Texas Association of Crime Lab Directors and yourself, and you're testifying for House Bill 5. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Good morning, y'all. As Chair says, I'm Dr. Peter Stout. I run the crime laboratory that services the city of Houston Forensic Science Center. And I'm also president of the Texas Association of Crime Lab Directors. In that capacity, I represent the 59 accredited laboratories for the state of Texas. 39 of those laboratories are located within physically the state of Texas, and 16 of those laboratories are part of the Texas DPS system. So just for perspective, Texas DPS handles about half of the requests for service in the state. About half of the requests are handled by county, municipal, or regional laboratories around the state. I have provided y'all way too much reading material for tonight. Big old stack of stuff that's extensive written testimony there. Yeah, everybody that knows me knows there are no short stories with me, sorry. The work of crime labs is complex and it is high risk. Everything we handle is just as likely to kill you as it is to look at you. And the consequences of the results we produce are high impact for everyone in the system. For drug crimes in particular, they are uniquely dependent on crime laboratories because the entire basis of the case is dependent on the result. There is no crime if there is no controlled substance. So all of them are waiting on all of us all the time. There are a total of 266 licensed in the state of Texas. That's it. 266 people. I think Alice and I know all 266 of them. That is between commercial laboratories and the public laboratories all across the country. 266 people. Those 266 people already are wildly overwhelmed with the tens of thousands of requests that the laboratories get from the 19,000 agencies in the state that make requests of us. No lab in the state has even remotely close to kind of sort of enough resources to even dream of keeping up with what is requested of us out of about 400,000 requests for service that are made of us every year. Now currently, THC is a mess for us. It's expensive, it's time consuming for us to even produce a minimally useful result for the rest of the system to even try to appropriately adjudicate a case. Whatever the solution is here, and I've been in front of y'all for about a decade trying to find a solution for this. I don't envy y'all trying to find something here. But we need in the crime laboratories for the testing framework to be as close and as consistent to how we would handle every other controlled substance case as we can make it. The farther away we get from that, the more expensive it gets. So fundamentally, that means for forensic laboratories, we need a framework where we are qualitatively determining the presence of any cannabinoid in any product. That's the same thing we would do. If I get something that looks like a legitimately manufactured round blue M30 tablet out of dude's cup holder, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to qualitatively determine that, and now it may be a perfectly legally manufactured oxycodone tablet. I'm going to determine, is there oxycodone there? Spoiler alert, it's probably fentanyl, but that's what almost all the M30s are right now. It's not that we can't provide a quantitative result. We just simply have too few resources to invest in the quantitative determination necessary and manage everything else that we have for criminal prosecutions. We do testing for criminal prosecutions. We can't give somebody money back if we get the testing wrong. There is an enormous risk in what we do. There is still, even if we have a framework where stuff is easier for us to test, and this I can't predict, there is still a risk that labs will see an increase in the case requests that will mean increased resources that we need. But at least if we are in a framework where we are dealing with a qualitative analysis in the laboratories, there's a chance we can manage stuff. Now, I get this stuff is horribly confusing. It is way too complex. You get nerds like me spouting off with arm-long chemical names all the time. So I'm happy to take whatever time is necessary and in whatever format's necessary for you to try and help you understand all of this. But I appreciate your time and consideration, and please understand the laboratories are in desperate need of resources in any scenario, and the farther this gets from the qualitative framework, that just goes up from there. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Stout. Chair recognizes Alice Amelhat. I'm sure I butchered that. My apologies. Testifying on behalf of DPS, and you are neutral on House Bill 5. Is that correct?
Good morning, Mr. Chairperson. That's correct.
Thank you.
Good morning, members of the committee. As the chair mentioned, my name is Alice Amelot. I'm Assistant Chief of the Crime Lab Division at Texas DPS. My other title is Deputy Lab Director. I'm here in that capacity today. Our accredited crime labs, as Dr. Stout mentioned, provide seized drugs and controlled substance analysis in 13 counties throughout Texas. So I'm here to be a resource witness and answer any questions you have about forensic testing at DPS.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I have a couple of questions, and then certainly I know committee members are going to have questions for this panel. We hear, as we look at this and learn more and more about it, we see different products out there, and you guys have mentioned the various products that you're encountering. Of the most dangerous and what you would consider most harmful, what kind of products do we see that you would consider to be the most harmful? I hear vape, I hear gummies, I hear THC-infused drinks. What are you guys encountering out on the street?
The way I would answer that, regardless of how it's ingested, it comes back to the concentration of THC in the product. Mm-hmm. One of the problems with the law is the dry weight basis. So your gummies, because of the weight, can contain a lot higher amounts of THC. So one gummy could have, many percentages of THC. So the form of ingestion is less of a concern than what is actually in the product. One of the big problems is rarely do we seize a product where the actual testing results in the THC concentration being the same as the label. These certificates of analysis that are coming from these out-of-state labs are almost all erroneous. We rarely find one that's actually accurate, and that's one of the problems. Even if someone is going in there for therapeutic reasons, they have no idea what they're really ingesting. That's why I mentioned the poison control going from 930 cases in 2009 to 22,000 last year. This is a result of that. I want to elaborate on Peter's testimony from a practitioner standpoint. What he's saying, what that means to us is, under a ban, when our officers out on the streets, we have a simple field test for THC. We test it, it's positive, we make the criminal case, and then it goes to the lab. And when it gets to the lab under a ban, the lab would only have to test for presence of THC, not quantity. A presence test is very quick and much less expensive. Now, and what he is saying is kind of, creating a problem and a backlog in the labs, is everything has to be tested for quantity. So under a 0.3% regulation system, we're still going to have to test for quantity of THC. That does not help us on the streets, and it doesn't help the labs. Under a ban, does it have THC or not? It'd be like cocaine or meth. If it's got those controlled substances, it's against the law, and then that's all we need for our purposes, and then it certainly simplifies their processes.
Okay.
Everything to add?
Thank you.
I really don't have anything more to add, other than I feel like what we have seen is the gummies seem to probably be the most dangerous, only because I want from the time that children start eating the little Welch's gummies, all right, little fruit gummies, to now the adults eating gummies. The gummies look the same, and you really have no idea what that concentration is and how many milligrams is in it. So I would warn you, be careful of the gummies.
Okay. So are we seeing concentrations of illegal THC among certain demographics in certain areas of the state? I mean, is it concentrated, or is it just pretty much statewide?
It's statewide. The reason this came to my attention about a year and a half ago is I was getting complaints from my citizens about young people going into these stores. Quite frankly, I didn't know a lot about it. It's a very complex subject. I've learned over the last year and a half. The more I've learned, the more it scares me. But it is widespread. It's across all demographics, race, socioeconomic status, and in all communities. That's why the video, we picked 3 random stores in 3 random cities, because I wanted to show you all that's going to be pretty typical of the shop near your home. We did not have any previous dealings with these particular stores.
Okay. And this bill doesn't do anything to teacup. Teacup will remain as it is today under this bill. Have you guys encountered anyone who, I guess, is intoxicated but are impaired driving, but who are under the teacup program?
Not to my knowledge. We're seeing a lot more intoxicated drivers. If you don't have a drug recognition expert on your department, which is a higher specialty of training, it's impossible to determine legal intoxication. And even with the DRE, it's very difficult. So we know a lot of intoxicated drivers are not being held accountable. For example, we may stop a driver that we believe is intoxicated, but we can't prove it. A lot of times they may be in possession of these products. We would make the arrest on the possession because we can't prove the driving while intoxicated. That's why, if you notice in that video, the clerk is coaching the undercover officer on only carrying with you what you're going to use, because she knows that what she's selling him is illegal, and she's trying to help him avoid being arrested.
If I could.
Sure.
So I'm a toxicologist. That's my training. I do drugs for a living. We're talking about the seized drug side of things, so the possession or sale of a material kind of thing is most of what we're talking about. But to Chief's point, the toxicology side and impairment, so an impairing drug used in the commission of a crime, driving under the influence or drug-facilitated sexual assault or those types of things, that runs straight through us again. And a reality that I have been screaming about for years now, we don't have the resources to be able to do that much more complex testing for drugged driving. They don't have the resources because they don't have enough DREs, drug recognition experts, to be able to do the interdiction at the roadside. Prosecution in court does not have enough resources to prosecute these far more complicated cases. So statewide, all of the laboratories, if we get an impaired driving case that has an alcohol concentration at 0.1 or above, all of us stop testing for drugs, because that's not what's going to get prosecuted. They're going to prosecute the alcohol, and we're not going to do the drugs because we don't have the resources to be able to test everything for drugs. that's where we're at. I mean, that's the limitation of resources in this. So keep in mind with this whole conversation about these drugs, we've got a whole nother side that we haven't even talked about of the resources necessary to deal with drugs that are involved in the commission of a crime.
So when you mention resources, and that seems to be the theme that, you know, you guys can test given the resources. Is that an accurate statement?
Correct.
Okay. Do you have any idea of what those resources?
The dollar figure is? So yeah.
We're always looking for dollars,
Yeah,
yes.
I gave you a couple of things just to give you a perspective around stuff. So in this country, on average, crime laboratories have a massive total of $620 per request to do everything for a criminal case. For perspective, a simple sexual assault kit is probably going to cost me $1,000. Firearms exam is probably at the bottom end going to cost me about $3,000. A drug case, like I put a couple of pictures in here of things I've got running through the lab right now. So a fairly typical Monday for us, and a case of pills that looks like this. I will probably be into a case like this if it's going to actually get prosecuted, maybe about $10,000 by the time I get done with the testing in it, because I have to test so many things within it. So I may be in Houston, thank you to the city of Houston, if not the best funded laboratory in the state, probably darn close. I've got about $1,500 per request. So I'm only going to go in the hole about $9,000 for this, whereas if this goes to DPS, they're going to be in the hole for about $10,000 on it. My best estimate, looking at things like Census of Publicly Funded Crime Labs, which is Bureau of Justice Statistics does this analysis of crime laboratories once every 5 years, so this is the current data. Looking at those data, there's one other source of economic data for crime laboratories. If you kind of put those together, my best estimate is in today's dollars, if we were to average about $2,500 per request in laboratories, that would be about a sustainable mark to deal with what we're dealing with. Okay. So I'm only about, you know, half what I need. They're probably a quarter of what they need.
Okay. Thank you. So in my layout, when I began, I quoted the former director of DPS as saying that labs are unable to test because they didn't have proper equipment to determine the concentration, and in addition made the statement state labs will not be testing a misdemeanor marijuana possession case. Is that accurate?
We do have methods now that allow us to test marijuana, which are plant-based cases. For misdemeanor cases, we aren't resourced to test all misdemeanor controlled substance cases in Texas. For the purposes of the Department of Public Safety and seizures that they do with misdemeanor plant cases, we do outsource those to another accredited lab in Texas who does that work for us. If outside of DPS, a law enforcement officer needs a misdemeanor plant case tested for some reason with confirmation from a prosecuting attorney, we will test those cases.
Okay, thank you. Members, I'm going to hold and let some of you guys ask some questions. I know Representative Alcott has a question. Representative?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to, since we've got some law enforcement agents here, I want to ask you if something comparable has happened here in Texas. The state of Washington legalized marijuana, I believe, back in 2016, or excuse me, 2012. And the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety did a study, and they looked at data for all the fatal crashes 2 years prior to legalization and the 2 years post-legalization. And what they found was the 2 years after legalization, the number of fatalities, traffic fatalities, the number of those cases where THC was involved doubled. And the latest results that I saw here in 2017 is that 21% of all fatal crashes in the state of Washington involved THC. And let me just give you an example. I'm just going to read these years. 2008, 8.5% of fatal crashes involved THC, which does demonstrate that, you know, people are gonna be doing marijuana whether it's legal or not. Anyway, 2008, 8.6% of all fatal crashes involved THC. In 2009, 8%. 2010, 8.4%. 2011, 8.7%. 2012, right before they legalized it, 8.8%. The following year, 14%. 2014, 18.3%. 2015, 17.6%. 2016, 17%. In 2017, 21.4%. It's a pretty dramatic graph when you look at it. So my question is, have you seen any comparable data, and maybe the laboratory experts, have you all ever worked together to see what percent of fatal crashes in Texas involve THC?
I have not, and I'm not familiar with that study, but it doesn't surprise me. There's a couple of theories that if this is banned, it will be displaced. In other words, if we ban this, well, they'll just go use another drug. That is absolutely not true. Accessibility is very critical for our younger populations. If they don't have THC readily accessible, they're not going to go down an alley looking for a heroin dealer. That's not typically what we see. So that's certainly one side of it. And so when we study these legalized states, what you're mentioning, Representative, is pretty much the trend that we're seeing. We're not seeing any net gain in quality of life and health and safety. We're seeing a decline in every case. And what's also interesting is even in some of these legalized states, they've now banned these THC consumables because they realize they're even worse than marijuana. So it's, you know, to me, I think it goes back to two major things, the health and safety. And now a lot of these people using are going to be driving. It just makes it more prolific, makes our job more difficult to detect. And then certainly I don't think we need to lose sight of the other thing that we hear as well. This will just help the black market thrive. Let me tell you where the black market is thriving. It's in legalized states because they're operating out in plain view in the open. You talk to people in Oklahoma and Colorado that are in law enforcement, it has surged. The black market has surged. The cartel and international activity has surged because they can operate with eyes wide open and they're not being scrutinized or detected. It's easier environment for them.
Representative, one of the things that I've not mentioned, and I think it's important for y'all to know, and especially your sheriff would want me to tell you this, is that we routinely deal with mental health situations in our jails. And routinely we seem to have felt that they were methamphetamine-induced psychosis. What we are now realizing with the expansion over the last 5 to 6 years of THC and the failure of the ability to enforce the laws of THC, that we're seeing a lot more THC psychosis in our jails because the accessibility is there. It's a younger population and generation that we're seeing. And when they're eating an edible or a cookie, or they're smoking something that allegedly has 3% flour that is really a 44% flour, it only takes one time to put you into THC psychosis if you're that one individual. And so I will tell you that your county jails are slowly but surely filling up with THC psychosis, not amphetamine psychosis. So the methamphetamine has been the problem that we've been dealing with for probably the last 10 to 15 years, and now it is slowly but surely turning into THC psychosis in your county jails.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
So I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to give you a chemistry lesson to give you this answer. So those data you're talking about there are based on delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol. So we keep saying THC, but THC is a catch-all for a bunch of compounds. The understanding of how delta-9 THC impairs in driving is all based on studies done under the National Institute of Health, and a couple of folks, Dr. Marilyn Hustis and Dr. Ed Cohn, did these studies on what's called the NIDA standardized cigarette. In former life, I used to manufacture those. That is manufactured to have 2% Delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol in known marijuana material.
The Delta-9.
The Delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol. Now, the problem that we've got is within understanding impaired driving, that's all that's really been studied. So when I test something and go to testify about it in court, if it's something other than Delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, it gets really difficult for us to testify about whether it's actually impairing, for them to prosecute it, for them to understand what's going on. So those numbers really don't recognize the fact that we see pretty regularly people that have the metabolites and indication of having taken Delta-8 tetrahydrocannabinol or THCP or THCV or THCO or THC, insert letter here, please. There are a bunch of these things, and we have no clue what they do. So not only can I not testify effectively about is that actually impairing or not. Now, keep in mind, and I'm sure you will hear this, because the basic studies around impaired driving with marijuana are pretty largely people using the standard NIDA cigarette. They slow down more, they're more cautious. They're easy to spot because they stopped about 200 yards before the stop sign, not running through the stop sign like the drunk. So it's in some ways, it's not wrong to say a marijuana impaired driver is perhaps safer, but that's not really what we see in the market now. That was on something that almost doesn't exist.
Would you get, this was done in the state of Washington, and I'm assuming this is probably mostly just smoking pot back then, but the officer here was referring to like a standard, a more general, less costly test, and that's just looking for the presence of THC. It wasn't getting into the weeds of which isomer of THC it was. So
it can't
I'm
do that.
assuming that probably that study done by AAA was probably that test. I
No.
don't know that. You don't think so?
So what they're looking at there is the involvement of
The
THC in the human from their blood sample to say they were impaired on it. Those field tests really can only be used on solid dosage kind of stuff. This is also a problem for everybody on the impairment side. There really isn't a version of a roadside test for it. DREs struggle, and Sheriff's nodding here. Alcohol behaves really nicely for impairment. I can tell you X amount of alcohol in the blood means X amount of stupid in the person. Almost no other drug does that. It's highly variable between individuals. We've published studies of what we see of people in the car driving around Houston at astronomical concentrations that historically we would have associated with somebody being long dead, not out driving. Really huge variability in those concentrations. So it's very dependent on what happens at the roadside to establish impairment, and there aren't roadside tests that effectively can be used to say that impairment at the roadside. So what they're talking in that is a sample that's come to the laboratory, we've analyzed it, and that's why I say it's probably what's in that is almost entirely Delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol and not all the rest of the stuff. So it's probably an undercount, I guess is what I'm saying.
So what is the Delta-8 we hear a lot about
Yep.
being in the gummies?
Yep.
Do you think that impairs driving just as much as Delta-9?
Maybe.
And-
Again, I don't have good controlled studies for it. Anecdotally, it sure looks like it. It also looks like Delta-10 is, certainly looks like HHC is, it looks like THCO, THCV, all look like they may be as impairing, but I don't have good controlled studies to be able to say that definitively.
Okay. Since we're talking about isomers, there's also a Delta-10 and Delta-11 isomer.
Yep.
Is that, are those tend to be, they give you a high too, just as much as the Delta-8 and Delta-9?
Probably, yes. All of these things, and what little bit of evidence we do have from not anecdotal things that come off of websites that say I did this and I felt this kind of thing, come from basically binding studies. So we've got how tightly does that particular compound bind to modeled brain receptors that might
CB1
indicate, but it's an imperfect way of determining that.
So if we were to go to a regulation model, pass legislation and a regulation model. Does your current testing allow for the detection of these other isomers?
We can detect pretty much
like-
everything.
Okay.
The problem for us becomes every one of those that I've got to determine quantitatively for criminal prosecution, because I'm sure you will also hear today, cannabis testing laboratories that do this for the industry, they test for concentration all the time, sure, and they do it far less expensively than I'm going to do it, but they're doing it in a circumstance where they may have to sample fewer times, they're providing a report to a manufacturer, and not having to support this in a criminal prosecution where I've got to demonstrate everything and probably have that same chemist come pick on my testing as inadequate. So every one of those things that I've got to determine quantitatively means I've got to go through that same validation, all of that documentation, all that explanation for each one of those compounds.
One last question. So you typically do that. So if you get a blood sample, like if DPS sends you a
Right,
blood
so-
sample.
Okay, so yeah, in blood, we do a quantitative determination in blood for like DUIs.
Quantitative and qualitative, or just quantitative of a
It's
particular
really
isomer?
quantitative there. The toxicology has classically
At what
been-
point do you decide which compound, which isomer you're looking for?
Well, this is where this
Because
system.
that could be, play a big role in the
Yes.
cost of this.
Oh,
Because if you're just looking
hugely.
for the delta 9
Yeah.
isomer, that's going to be a lot quicker and simpler.
There is an interplay within the system of what I end up testing is driven a lot by what they're going to interdict, so the samples I'm going to get in the first place, and then what prosecution feels they can bring a charge on and actually try. It doesn't, and we struggle with this a lot of, I can devise really expensive testing that's going to give them an answer for all of these things, but if prosecution can't do anything with it, I just wasted a bunch of money that I then don't have to use on sexual assault kits. So there is an interplay there of what I'm going to test is very much dictated by what the rest of the system is trying to do, and we just have to react to that.
Thank you.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you all for being here. More importantly, thank you for what you do for our state. I actually have probably quite a few questions, if you could bear with me. There are some of us on the dais who were not here when the decision was made to change the definition of marijuana and put this 0.3% THC in place without any guidelines or regulations, which is actually why we're here. So I'd just like to start out with very basic questions based on the testimony, and then I'll get into some of my questions, some questions I have coming in from my district. First, I would like to start with Chief Dye. The video that you showed us was quite disturbing. What is the status of those three stores? And those are all in North Texas, correct?
Yes, ma'am. They're still operating. So we have a very large criminal investigation ongoing. I can't release any of that video because it's a pending criminal investigation. So this was just going into shops open to the public, having a consensual conversation to depict the demeanor of this industry. So they are alive and well and operating today as they did when we got the video, unfortunately. But again, the reason we randomized is we wanted to get a cross-section of what we believe is happening in most, if not all, of these stores.
And if you could, provide a general timeline from discovering that one of these stores is selling illegal substances at the time that you close them down, by the time an arrest is made.
Yes, ma'am. So I can talk to our investigations. Sure. We did 9 search warrants last summer. We have partnered with the Drug Enforcement Administration. Only one of the stores that we executed search warrants on actually closed. All the others restocked from the warehouses were in business the next day. There's also a tremendous burden on law enforcement when we do these investigations on storage capacity. So I often get the question, well, Chief, why are not more departments doing what you're doing? And it's very simple. It's very costly. We had to test all of those products through a private lab because DPS can't handle the volume. So it's very expensive. Some district attorneys in some counties won't even prosecute the cases. And then, you know, does the department have the city support and the resources to do that. I can tell you we didn't have the resources, but it was important to my city because we had kids going into these stores. And luckily, one of the worst offenders for the kid patron was shut down. So as we've developed these investigations, I can't go into any other details, but I can reiterate what I said. Certainly, the products tested were well over the 0.3, many into the 70%, just like we saw in this video. Very few products, if any, the label matched the actual contents tested. And then the other side of this is where this money, how much money is going through these businesses and where this money is flowing across our world. Certainly, we have verified that we do know that money is going to regions and countries that are of a concern to the national security of the United States. So our investigations are very much ongoing. But ma'am, to really kind of give you a short answer, from the time we started last summer till the time we finished, it could be 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And let me just say this. If this product is banned, instead of 24 stores in Allen that I don't have time to manage and oversee, I can tell you most of the stores in my city were 38 minutes away from getting rid of their inventory. They had already told us, if this is banned, we're out of business. But because it was vetoed, I've still got 24 stores to manage. Had it been banned, I may only have 1 or 2 stores I have to manage. Well, guess what? I can oversee 1 or 2 stores. And so there's a real workload issue where that ban would have really helped us actually, because remember, we have no issue with legal CBD and CBG. If that's a therapeutic value, we were proponents at TPCA for Teacup, expanding Teacup. We were proponents. I brought it forth originally to lower first-time possession from felony to misdemeanor. We got 17-year-old high school kids getting arrested for THC that are getting a felony charge today. So it's a comprehensive, thoughtful approach. And what we did, I had 24 stores. We only did warrants at 9 stores. We didn't do all 24 because this was not an attack on the industry. But the more we've learned through factual information, not opinion, we've learned that the stores we hit are pretty much like all the other stores that you saw in the video.
Thank you. And I will ask you about the money at the end of my questions for you. But I just want to stay here for a second because I'm a little shocked that we've had these stores selling limits 75%, well illegal territory, and no arrests. If there was a guy down the street selling dope to a kid, I don't understand why we're not making arrests and why we haven't been making arrests for the last 5 years.
Yes, ma'am. Well, again, I was equally shocked when I first started discovering this. That's really the problem. When you see these polls, the average Texan doesn't really understand what's being sold in these stores and what's going on in these stores. That's why they think, well, it's just harmless marijuana. See, there's a real uneducated segment of our population. Once people become educated, just like the House did in the regular session, they voted out a ban because they became educated on the subject matter. The reason you're not seeing that is, again, in my city of 27 square miles, I've got 24 shops. These chiefs are overwhelmed by the sheer volume in their city. They don't have the resources, and every product they seize, it's going to cost them a few $100s to get every product tested. They can't send them to the DPS lab, so we're having to pay a private lab. Every product has to be tested separately. It's around $500, so they can't afford it. And then in some counties, the DA won't even prosecute it. Again, that's why we studied .3 regulation. We were open-minded to it, but it all comes back to the only way to solve this problem is a ban, period. House Bill 5 addresses what we need to make it manageable. Ma'am, to your point, to hold the illegal operators accountable. Right now, it's the Wild West.
And staying in this legal aspect of things, have there been any arrests for dealing drugs out of these shops?
In our investigations,
in your experience,
very few, but there have been some. Yes, ma'am.
Clearly not enough.
I will tell you, Representative, law enforcement is very cautiously optimistic and hoping that our lawmakers will help us. We are waiting on your decisions, quite frankly, to get after this. But right now, it's in such limbo, both from a practical, affordable, and political standpoint that a lot of these chiefs just feel like they're in a gray area. So we're hoping for some relief from you all.
Yeah, I still struggle. 75% THC is illegal. I don't know what you're waiting for us for. People should have been arrested all
Well,
day, every day
right.
until they're off the street.
Again, your cities don't have the money to test. You don't have, most every police department in the state of Texas has vacancies. They're just trying to keep their heads above water. This is why I mentioned, Representative, in my comments, this is just yet another issue that you put on the doorstep of law enforcement that we don't have the resources to manage. And then politically, we got DAs that won't even prosecute it. I can tell you the zeal is there.
Yeah.
The resources aren't.
And speaking of resources, I don't see resources in this bill for you either, whether it be for law enforcement or the crime lab or anyone. So that's something else that we need to look at, because the funding is also not in this bill to help you do what you're doing today, with or without the ban. You can't test, you can't arrest. There are a lot of issues here that I hope we can flesh out during this hearing. You had mentioned the federal government and what their position was specifically when it comes to marijuana. That has changed a lot, and I think that has given a lot of pause to folks all over the country, really. We just learned that the Senate has stripped out their THC language just a couple of weeks ago. We learned just this past Monday that President Trump is discussing rescheduling marijuana. Are you concerned about that at all?
We're very concerned, and let me just say, I'm a 41-year practitioner. I spent my first 20 years working the streets. I worked a lot of narcotics cases. That's my background. The president and many other people don't know what they don't know. If you really understand the product and what it does to our society, you will share my viewpoint. But unfortunately, the hemp industry is very well funded, and they're very powerful. And I'm a public servant, and that's what we're going against. Now, if you'll notice in the president's comments, he kind of dismissed marijuana as maybe not being needed to be classified so highly, but he said, absent medical purposes, this is some really bad stuff. What I'm hoping is, like you all, he becomes educated on the topic. And another thing that any police officer will tell him, this is not 4% marijuana. This is 40, 50% marijuana, just the plant. They developed this plant to be very potent. So again, I think that's why I said in my comments, this is the defining moment. Are we going to do what is the political answer potentially, or are we going to do what's best for the health and safety of our communities? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your response to that as well. It is quite contentious. So stepping over now into field sobriety, I'm going to use an example. Let's use a prescription drug, Xanax or something. You can tell when somebody's under the influence. Can't really test for it at the moment. And when the quantitative side does come through, does it matter if it's 0.5 milligrams or 5 milligrams, or does it just matter that somebody was driving under the influence?
Well, certainly the other side of the table may have additional response to this, but the way it works, and ma'am, just so you know, in Allen, Texas, we do put people in jail for this on the street level. Unfortunately, I don't even have the resources to go after all the stores at this time, but certainly we're doing our best. When we stop somebody on the streets, we have a simple field test that shows THC, yes or no, basically, right? And then if the officer's discretion, she decides to make an arrest, then that does have to go to the lab. But I have to send it to a private lab. I can't send it to DPS. So that criminal case has just cost me probably a $500 testing fee, because under 0.3 regulation and under the current way things are, we have to prove that it's above 0.3. So remember, what they're selling and what we're explaining to you all, it's already against the law federally. It's already against the law in the state of Texas. But there is absolutely no hesitation to do what they're doing. So that's the process it goes through. They would make the arrest if they chose to do so. We would have enough probable cause, if you will. And then once the results come back from the private lab, that's sent to our district attorney for the prosecution. Now, I'm in Collin County. You'll hear from DA Willis, I believe, on the next panel. Very similar to Rockwall County. We use great levels of discretion, but we're a rule of law county. So I also have the ability to make some of those cases in my county where maybe in other counties they can't do that.
Okay, go ahead.
I think your question was on an impaired driving
Yes.
situation. So
Yes.
Xanax, alprazolam. Texas, like all states in the country, is what's called a per se state for alcohol. So above a 0.08 blood alcohol concentration, the law makes the assumption that the person is impaired for the purposes of criminal prosecution. For all the other drugs, it is just the demonstration of impairment. There is
Right.
no per se limit. So that means we come down to an argument about what did the officers observe in the field of driving behavior that they can then demonstrate and testify to was indications of impairment. And my experts saying this concentration of alprazolam and its metabolites in the blood is consistent with that kind of behavior. And from what studies are available, in our basically professional opinion, that appears to be consistent with impairment. But there's no like line in the sand that says you done be this stupid if you got that much alprazolam in you. And this is where, like I say, it becomes really difficult on most other drugs, and why it's so difficult for prosecutors to try these cases is you have to be able to convince a jury that the individual was in fact impaired. Does that answer your
Yes.
question around that?
Yes. And I think I was just trying to find an analogy as to, not having a quantitative test in the moment. If there's impairment observed, it's probably should be treated like any other.
Well, so
drug.
like with alcohol, because really in almost all states, Texas included, there's two prongs to an impairment charge. There is the per se side, which should stand alone on its own. You're over 0.08, you're assumed to be impaired. That should be done. And then there's the demonstration of impairment by signs and symptoms at the roadside and the concentration that we report. Almost always, even with alcohol, because these are usually pretty litigated cases and they are pretty competently defended, you got to do both. This is also why it becomes that much more difficult for drugs, is there isn't a per se limit, so there's nothing to fall back on that says, well, by the law, they're at least impaired whether they're above this or not. It's all about the demonstration and the argument that they're impaired. So that's where we're at with THC, marijuana, any of the cannabinoids, and almost all the rest of the drugs.
Right, thank you. Just wanted to make sure I was thinking in the right way here. As I mentioned, we weren't here when all this went down, some of us, and as a mom, thank God my child is grown and I don't have to deal with this issue today. Well, I have nieces and nephews, but with children, and I'm saying children like as in teenagers, do any of you actually believe if these things are taken off the market that these kids don't know where to go get or will get marijuana?
I do. If you look at the packaging, it's made to look like Doritos, Cheetos, Skittles. The black market would have trouble replicating that packaging to the level that it is. We have parents now that think their kids are eating chips or candy because they're so similar. With kids, it's accessibility. It's what the peers are doing. Because it's so accessible, it's more prolific. So yes, ma'am, we are very confident that if the accessibility is diminished, the usage will go down in the younger ages. Because think back to when you're young, a lot of these kids that we talk to, they didn't seek to go buy THC or get a vape. My buddy was doing it, my friend was doing it, I just tried it. It was there, so they tried it. And again, they can get pretty easy access to the stores, either many of them are not checking IDs or through a surrogate buyer. So yes, ma'am, with younger populations, we don't always see displacement. We don't usually see them going to another drug if the accessibility. And then another thing I hear from parents is, you got to help us. I mean, I have to now check every bag of chips my kid is eating. I mean, give me a break. So the other illicit drugs are certainly easier to identify.
And then now I'd like to get to your national security implications. Could you explain to us about the funding, the money, and what you had mentioned earlier?
No, ma'am, I cannot go into any more detail. I can tell you what I told you is factual. We know that there's tremendous amounts of money going through these locations. We know that money is going to regions and countries in the world that are of a significant concern to our national security. That's as far as I can go because it's all a pending investigation, but I state that as a fact, not a supposition.
Can't tell us which location
No, ma'am.
or certain amounts or what the indication would be?
No, ma'am. The Drug Enforcement Administration we are still assisting. They've taken over as the primary investigator on our cases.
So I guess then the implication is there may be an entity operating in the state, sending money to places who probably don't like us very much.
I think that's a fair assumption, and I will go back to K2 spice and bath salts. I was in law enforcement then, of course. What we saw then was a very similar pattern. The one difference with those products, the lethality was much more evident. This is more of a slow degradation of quality of life. You may hear from some of the mothers later that will tell you firsthand about that. But yes, ma'am, very, very similar to what we saw at that time.
And then for the sheriff, or even crime lab folks here, there is no additional funding here. If this ban does go through, how is this going to impact you?
Well, if it's a ban, it's really a minimal impact because there are very simple, easy tests that we can test for the presence of THC, and then it goes to the lab, and it's a very simple test for the lab to test for the presence of THC. I'm sure resources, financial, for the amount that will come in their direction, but with a ban, we'll be able to shut it down. It might be very prolific in the very beginning, but it will obviously start weaning off. Back to your follow the money. This morning I was on the phone with one of the directors of the Rocky Mountain HIDA Task Force, and ever since Oklahoma started their regulation of marijuana and THC, it has become very prolific, and everything is being run up there by the Chinese nationals. We're seeing it down here. The products that are in Texas are coming from Oklahoma, and they have strong Chinese influence to it. Also, just in my own county, I have 11 head shops that we've looked into. I will tell you that 10 of them, I cannot pronounce their names, and most all of them are Middle Eastern.
So you're saying that with the ban, you no longer need quantitative testing then?
I'm sorry?
You no longer need quantitative testing?
With a ban, I don't need quantitative testing. No, ma'am, I don't.
But we just heard testimony saying that the packaging is incorrect, and when items are tested, it's a higher amount. So how are we going to know that what's on the shelf is, oh, you're saying that if we get rid of all THC,
Yes,
but
ma'am.
you don't think that they'll get creative as most bad actors do and just change the packaging on these things?
Oh, I'm sure they'll definitely get creative and change packaging, but we have that ability to test it, and if it has THC in it, then we obviously can deal with that issue because it does have THC in it. Currently, it's $530 is what it's going to cost me. So if I was to hit one of those stores, and I feel like 90% of what is going to be in one of those stores is going to be illegal, but it's going to be $530 for every test. And then which store do I pick on and go hit? Because I obviously cannot afford to do all of them. I'm a county of about 50,000, and I'm probably one of the have a more robust budget than some of the sheriffs of a county of 50,000. I could not even begin to start shutting down those stores. I wish I had the resources of the city of Allen, all right, but I don't. But if with a ban, I can do it with the resources that I have now. There's no doubt that the laboratories will need some more resources, but law enforcement, I believe, could deal with the issues of today with the resources that we have of today. And I would refer to the chief to see where the cities, but I feel like the counties could.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure you weren't going to stop spot checking these stores.
No, ma'am, and Sheriff is spot on. This solves the problem for law enforcement. And we have to ask ourselves, why are we going to all of this expense and trouble for an expensive regulatory program for a very small segment of our population that wants to get high? We've got teacup. We've got a solution for those with problems. So I keep going back to that as a taxpayer. The the investment seems grossly inordinate with the number of users.
So either way, with or without the ban, crime lab testing needs more funding.
Well, with the ban, we need, my city wouldn't need any more funding because, again, most of these stores are going to shut their doors and go away because they can only make a profit selling intoxicating hemp. And after those first few months, they're not going to be able to stay in business. Most of them will voluntarily close. And the ones that decide to stay, again, they're manageable now. I can handle that. So, you know, we're not requesting funding in House Bill 5 or Senate Bill 5 because they're ban bills and it wouldn't require us much extra expense. Now, if the lawmakers, if you all decide to regulate, you'll never be able to give us enough people or money to keep up with it.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
So I wish I had a shorter answer for you, as always. However, okay, a couple of things about the due process. So what they're talking about, what they need is a little different than the laboratories.
Yes.
Labs need more money, period, any scenario.
Well, I heard you say that
Yeah.
you can barely keep up with what you currently
What we got
have.
right now.
So, okay.
When he's talking about a $500 test, I'm going to pay about the same if I outsource stuff to the same lab they do to try and keep up with some of the stuff. They charge me about $500 per test. What I'm going to do testing around is going to be around developing the data necessary to adjudicate the case. They have a need to establish probable cause for the warrants to be able to seize that material and hang on to it. So for them, they're going to pull something off the shelf, and they need a result on that to justify that probable cause. Where we're at right now, because the tests that they have available to them, again, this is the hazard of the catch-all phrase THC, the test that they have available to them for that probable cause reacts with anything cannabinoid. So they can't distinguish in the field from a product that is CBD, CBG from a product that is a bazillion % THC, delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol. So their probable cause gets jammed up behind that cost of testing because they need specific quantitative testing for the probable cause. So in the circumstances of SB 5 as it exists, you basically say all the cannabinoids are no, except for CBD, CBG, which makes your field tests okay, but there's ways around it. So it at least gives them relatively inexpensive access to probable cause in the field. It's going to come to me, us as labs. We are going to do far more specific chemical testing, and we are going to have to test. If they seize 300 pounds of stuff, I'm probably going to have to test 50 to 100 tests within that to demonstrate for the purposes of trial and the adjudication of the case that all 300 pounds are in fact a controlled substance. So the difference in resources needed, the ban makes it easier for them to determine in the field and justify probable cause. For us, we still, it's easier for us to test because now all I have to do is say up or down, delta 8, delta 6, delta 10, THCV, THC, any of those things are there. What is difficult and probably is going to be the case for us, that means we need more resources in the labs. I'm going to see a lot more cases that come from them.
But Representative, remember, under a ban after the first few months, these out-of-state manufacturers are going to stop shipping into Texas. The volume will be high for 2 or 3 months in terms of quantity, but it's quickly going to diminish once they know that it's banned in Texas. So the temporary spike in the lab's needs will go down when they figure out they can't ship it into Texas because it can't be sold in Texas. Again, I go back. Instead of having 24 stores, I may have 1 or 2, and how long they will last will be probably not very long if they're not selling legal product.
Go ahead.
And we've talked a number of times with a number of all y'all's staffs around basically the concept of whitelisting cannabinoids rather than the current circumstance and the definition. A lot of the problem we've got is because the definition of hemp is less than 0.3% delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol by dry weight, which means it could have 100% delta 8. Well, that's not delta 9, so it's hemp. It could be 100% delta 10. Well, that's not delta 9, therefore it's hemp. It could be it's 100% delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinolic acid, which when it hits the heater coil of the vape is going to instantly turn into delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol. But because the product is 100% delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinolic acid, that's hemp. It's not delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol. The definition, it seems like the definition is a technicality, but the definition is everything here.
And that was my whole point in my opening statement. So thank you very much for being here.
Representative Schofield.
I just have a few questions. I want to make sure I understood the testimony. Now, Chief, at the end of your video, you showed some brief stats and you mentioned them, that 2 of the samples of items that you found in those stores were over 77% THC.
All stores sold us products that were over 70% THC concentration, all 3.
And under the current law that they're using to put these things on the shelves, the legal limit is 0.3.
Correct.
So that's over 250 times more potent than the law allows.
Correct.
And as a chief and sheriff as sheriff, to me, the analogy that comes immediately to my mind is with gambling machines. Because we don't want Dave & Buster's and Chuck E. Cheese to be out of business, it's not illegal to possess a slot machine. Unless we catch you in the act of gambling on it, it's not illegal. So we go into a place that has 40 of them, and there's nothing you can do unless somebody's going and getting money out of it at the time. To me, that seems an awful lot like what we're seeing here. When we did away with the ban, and I wasn't here in the legislature when we did that, now you can't look at a package and from the outside with your x-ray vision see what percentage THC it is. So to Representative Pearson's question, why aren't you arresting them now? How do you know looking at it what it is? You see a bright yellow package, you can't tell me what percentage that is. In your mind, is this a similar situation to what we have in gambling, which is regulating it is ineffective because you can't bust them unless you catch them in the act, and you can't catch them in the act in this case unless you run expensive tests on it?
Yes, sir. I think your analogy is accurate. You know, I get a lot of, well, alcohol is legal, and I get a lot of, tobacco is legal, and, they are different products, but I think we all understand now that tobacco kills you if you smoke it long enough, right? So if we knowingly know that these products are very high concentrations and very dangerous, we have to ask ourselves, why are we allowing it? And then we have to ask ourselves with the regulation, the liquor industry, regardless of how you feel about alcohol, they follow very strict guidelines. They self-police themselves. And so I made the statement, it really is the Wild West because, sir, to your comment, very seldom do we find the label that matches the actual content. So even if you're going in there for good intentions, for therapeutic purposes, it's still dangerous to you because you don't know. If you heard the lady talking to the officer about wax, she said, if you've never done this, you'll die. That was her statement. And she sells this stuff. She uses this stuff. So, again, I agree with your analogy. Sheriff may have some additional comments.
Well, it is almost very similar in the context of every one of those stores that's in my county and in every sheriff's county and in all of your counties. Those packages, there's nothing about those packages that is believable. Every product that we have tested in my county has come back marijuana. It has not come back hemp. So effectively, they are selling marijuana. But if you were to read the package, they're calling it hemp, and they're saying it is 3% or less, and that is not the case. Otherwise, the DPS lab would not tell me it is marijuana.
So what would change if we passed a regulation bill? It seems like we'd have exactly the same situation we have now. The law says one thing, the packages on the shelves are something completely different, and you're left with having to send officers into every store and pull stuff off the shelves, which you can't do. So you have to go get warrants from a judge, which means you have to have some probable cause, which you don't have because you just see a yellow package. what are you supposed to do what's the difference between if we pass a regulation bill and what we've had since 2019?
Nothing. It's been regulated since 19. They've just been operating illegally because they know the resources aren't there to check it. The only thing that changes under regulation, the number of stores increase because now you've legalized it, period, end of story. And let me tell you what else will happen. Even the good law enforcement agencies that are aggressive are going to give up on this, because you're going to have many more stores. You'll never catch up with resources on testing or personnel to oversee this. You will be legalizing marijuana if you vote for regulation of 0.3. We've studied it. You know, we're not here to scare anybody. We know the facts. We're out there every day with our community. And the other thing, I talk to my community. I have yet to have somebody come up to me and say, why are you fighting this THC? But almost every time I go to lunch, somebody comes up and thanks me for fighting it. So don't believe the polls. Believe what your people are telling you. And I appreciate that, because that's the real problem that we see. If you regulate, you legalize.
And the thing that really strikes me is we're not seeing a 0.3% legality being used to justify 4% or 5%. You know, I'm sure back in the day, if it had 6%, it had a name like Maui Wowie, and people were telling you this is great stuff. We're seeing 77%. And even if you've seen 30 or 40, that what the truck they've driven through the little loophole that they were given is unbelievable to me. And I don't see how a regulation scheme is going to fix that. Now, let me ask a question for the other side of the table. Okay, so if we pass a regulation ban, how much is it going to cost you if your law enforcement agency even bothers to do a major effort to follow the law? And again, I go back to the gambling. I live in Harris County, and I will tell you right now, the sheriff's department knows where the gambling houses are. And there's one in my district everybody knows about, and they don't do anything but gambling, so everybody leaves them alone. There was another one in my district that popped up over the winter, and it was too close to houses, and some of the ladies that lived there saw teenage girls going around there in the middle of the winter in bikinis, and they said something else is going on here. The sheriff shut them down like that. The reality is the sheriffs aren't going to go and shut down all the gambling houses. If we have a regulation scheme here, and they continue to do what they're doing now, selling 77% product, lots of law enforcement just aren't going to be able to, they're not going to spend all their time dealing with that. But the ones that do, if the city of Houston, under the former chairman of the Criminal Justice Committee in the Senate, says, we're not having this, how much, and forget how much it's going to cost in extra police time and overtime and officers, how much is it going to cost your lab if the amount of THC you see actually being out there, if there's any kind of proportional effort to send you product to test?
Okay, so basically you're saying if we've got a situation where I have to do a quantitative determination then on a bunch of stuff, and actually, you know, I got one in here. This one is a current case that we have. It's like 300 pounds of their pre-roll cigarette. They are very much, there's even part of their paperwork says, attention, this is hemp, not marijuana. Has COAs, very clear demonstration that it is less than 0.3% total delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol. It's got a lot of THCP, THCO, and HHC in it. So at the current moment, that's hemp, currently. If there is a regulatory situation that I then have to come up with a quantitative determination of all those other things, that's going to be expensive. I mean, I'm up to simply deal with the delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol determination in these for a criminal prosecution of these things. 300 pounds of these, they're all in little 6 cigarette boxes, and there's a bunch of them. I'm probably going to test 100 of these. So I'm probably going to spend on this case right now $20,000. So that's kind of the scale of what we're talking. I mean, that's different than what they're saying there. And these huge costs that, like I say, I know you're going to get said, well, we can do the testing a whole lot less. Yeah.
But not to the standard
But
of
not for a criminal
beyond a
prosecution
reasonable
where I have
doubt.
to demonstrate all of this stuff. That's what makes it so challenging for us.
And you mentioned earlier that sometimes you have to outsource. I'm assuming once you do that, you kind of lose control of it. Is that even usable in a prosecution,
Well,
or does that just tell you I need to test this stuff further in my own
We,
lab?
when we outsource stuff, we tend to pick cases that we know, there are reasons it's probably not going to go to trial. We need to get the results there so the rest of the system can move on with things, but it's probably not going to go to trial. You also got to keep in mind, people start getting really twitchy about mailing large quantities of drugs around the country. The FedEx guy is going to get kind of nervous if he, drops the package and fentanyl starts falling out all over the place. It really limits the ability to centralize processing of these things because of just sheer transportation. And then at the other end, getting the expert from Pennsylvania to come to Texas, to come to wherever in Texas, is really expensive for the prosecutors and the courts. That's why it tends to drive towards the laboratories within the state. Another aspect, and again, sorry for the chemistry lesson here.
Now, I have to say, I laughed earlier because the person you said you were going to give a chemistry lesson to is a professional medical researcher. He's the one guy in the building that can stay with you step for step down the sideline.
Yeah.
The rest
Cool.
of us are running behind hoping it's an incomplete pass. But
These-
so do the best you can. I'm a lawyer, not a...
These cannabinoids can be moved around between each other. So CBD, cannabidiol, if I treat it with a little bit of acid and a little bit of heat, I will close the ring on it and I make delta-8 tetrahydrocannabinol. I can then, in the laboratory, take delta-8 and I can push it over to delta-9. I can take delta-9 and push it to delta-10. I can make all of these things out of it. So again, we go back to the federal definition of this. Hemp is cannabis sativa L, all plant parts growing a knot, a couple other things in there. Any extracts, derivatives, isomers, salts of isomers, but it's that derivative thing. Again, these definitions are everything. If I take CBD grown from a legitimate hemp plant and I treat it in the laboratory to make delta-8, that's hemp. If I take that delta-8 and make delta-9 out of it, that's a derivative of hemp, isn't it? I don't know. But this is part of the problem for the system. I can do the testing. I can spend tens of thousands of dollars giving you a defensible quantity of how much delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol is in this, and we are still going to argue in court about where that delta-9 came from. If it came from hemp originally,
Which is why I'm getting sued, Representative, to your question. That's why more chiefs don't do this. They're always going to sue a chief that comes after them, and they're going to argue that very thing. They want this to be tested as hemp because it was derived from hemp, but then became illegal, and that's why I'm in the middle of a lawsuit. And that's another inhibitor to enforcement. They try to intimidate you not to enforce it by suing you. We're not intimidated.
I mean, good news for me, I'm kind of agnostic on the aspects that are important to them. I can't give them the answer of, to me, a delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol molecule is a delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol molecule. I can't tell you that it came from cannabis sativa L as a hemp plant or cannabis sativa L as a marijuana plant. I can't tell you that.
Okay. Now, Alice, I don't want to call you by your first name, but I can pronounce it.
That's okay.
So I'm not going to botch that. One of the two law enforcement, I forget if it was the chief or referred to sending stuff to you.
Right.
Around the state, obviously, the city of Houston is a large entity. They have their own lab. I'm sure that most of the bigger cities do. Who do you service, and how overburdened, or if you are overburdened, are you? Are the small towns going to be able to do this at all if they don't have capacity and they've all got to send them to you?
So right now, I think it depends on the quantity of cases that are coming in. So if House Bill 5, if a regulated ban were to pass, and we had the same amount of criminal casework that we have for the current submissions of vapes and edibles, plant material, if that didn't change, it would actually increase our capacity to do drug analysis. because this would allow us to move to the qualitative analysis, the presence of the different cannabinoids, versus doing this semi-quantitative analysis that we're doing today. Our challenge and why we can't determine a fiscal note on the DPS side is we don't know how many cases will come in, we don't know how many seizures, we don't know how much law enforcement will need our forensic support. So as such, if we were asked, there wouldn't be a fiscal note from the department, from the crime laboratory. I speak only for the scientists. There wouldn't be a fiscal note on this.
But as a person who runs the lab, so we're not getting an official fiscal note from you,
Right.
how worried are you and how much do you thinking this is probably gonna, I'm probably gonna balloon to this and we don't have it? And again, a lot of fiscal notes are based on conjecture of, if they prosecute these, we expect prosecutions to rise by 300%, therefore this much. We understand it's a guess.
If you want to speak for Houston, absolutely.
I can give you an answer for Houston. So
I would take an answer for Houston.
basically what I have done, and this is me, blame me, I can't keep up with the pills that we know are killing people. So I have not, and I have said this pretty plainly, I don't think it's responsible for me to invest what probably would be about $1 million to buy additional equipment, train additional people to test marijuana at the scale we might need until I know what I'm testing. So I'm gonna pay attention to all the fentanyl stuff until y'all make up your minds what I need to test, and then I will make that investment. But for me to test at the scale that probably Houston needs, probably somewhere in the scale of $1 to $2 million.
Okay. And now, we've talked a lot about cost without really asking what the cost drivers are. So when you have to buy new equipment or keep equipment updated, that's a cost, usually upfront. Is it the personnel and the hours? Is it the materials that you use to test it with? What would be your cost drivers in this kind of a thing?
Personnel and hours.
Okay.
Huge, and
so that's not just a cost driver, that's a can we find these people?
Yes. So, like I say, there are 266 licensed drug chemists for the state of Texas. In this study, and this is one of the reasons I hand this one out a lot, nationwide, crime laboratories, the 423 publicly funded crime labs in the country, have about 15,000 people that work between all those labs, meaning in the country there are maybe 1,500 drug chemists. So if I need, and I think we've talked about the kind of scale you'd need somewhere like 100 to 200 additional people. No, we're gonna hire 10, 20% of the entire nation's population of drug chemists to Texas?
Yeah.
They don't exist, so that means we've got to train them. Well, training them is about a 2-year arc, because ultimately they're gonna have to defend this stuff in court.
If you can pay well enough to get people
If I
to
can
take
pay
those
them well
jobs.
enough to do that. So I am probably, we all figure within crime labs across the country, for us to create a new analyst is gonna cost us somewhere around $500,000.
All right, well, I appreciate all of you, and Dr. Stout, I don't know how much in a hurry you are to get back, but I have some non-THC local questions for you. When the panel
Happy
breaks
to.
up, if you got
Happy
a couple
to.
of minutes.
Yep, I can hang out.
Thank you.
Representative Schaffner.
Thank you so much. I want to go back to the national security level. Sheriff Hawthorne, you had talked again about the relationship between China, the cartels, and the Middle East. Who plays what role?
Well, I would tell you that a lot of the chemicals, from what we're understanding, are China-based. So it comes over into Mexico. The cartel then gets involved in it. The photograph that I passed out, you'll see that there's the colored packages in the side of the wall, correct?
The box.
That is going to be THC. Was not targeted for Texas, we don't believe. It was headed out of state. It was an interdiction stop. The cocaine and the THC were headed somewhere. Those packages were clearly labeled at 44% THC.
Labeled.
Labeled. So.
What does it mean, actual?
Correct. They're currently at the laboratory. Hopefully we'll find out, but once again, DPS won't be able to give me that quantitative number. They'll just be able to tell me it's THC.
Mhm.
So I'll have to use a private lab to get that final result of what that percentage is.
Excuse me for just 1 minute. How long does that literally take for a private lab to
Depends on whether I
quantitatively-
want to pay the upcharge for the
Rush?
speedy recovery.
Is
Yes.
that like a day or a month or 6 months?
I would say probably within 2 to 3 days. Otherwise, it's about a 6-week turnaround.
Okay.
So,
And
so
I was just going to add, there, commercial labs that are available to them, there's basically 2 in the country.
In the country?
Yeah.
Where are they?
One's up in DFW area, the other
Mhm.
one's in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So to us, that's one of those obvious that even if you legalize it, the cartel's going to continue to stay in the THC business. So even if you legalize the product in other states, because that's probably headed to a state where it's okay to put 44% on the packaging, right? Where here, that would run a lot of red flags. Ours probably are 44%. But the package that was probably targeted for Texas is just going to say 3% on it.
Got it.
All right. So bottom line is for us in law enforcement, we know that moving into the regulatory aspect just opens the door all the more for the cartel to be able to operate in Texas.
Okay, and then where's the Middle Eastern aspect come?
Well, that I think I'd have to turn to the chief because they've got some big warehouse investigations that they're operating that I think they're probably, I don't want to speak for him, but I know that what I'm hearing, there are Middle Eastern ties, that they feel like that the money is being channeled to support terrorism, and I just have to turn that over to the chief to answer that question.
Yes, ma'am. Just with all due respect, I can't get into the specifics
Sure.
because these are pending criminal investigations.
Just in general?
Well, in general, I can just tell you what I told you. We know it's regions of the world and countries that are of concern to our national security.
And so the money being made by the product is being moved out of the country to countries maybe not our friends?
Correct. How much of that money, I don't have that answer for you, but certainly some of the money.
Are any of the stores being funded, back-ended by, or some, or what percentage of the stores are being paid for, by out-of-nation characters, or?
That's still all under investigation. It would be speculation at this point if I tried to answer that.
Okay.
And
Can you say anything,
I'm not
Sheriff,
gonna
that he can't say?
Well, as a sheriff, I'm not afraid to speculate, but at the same time, obviously, y'all know the
Yeah.
sheriff is a political office, and I'm gonna speak my piece to my constituents and to the state legislature. Follow the money.
Right.
Follow the money. I mean, there's a reason why I have 11 of these head shops in my county that is relatively a very conservative county. And obviously, I will tell you that there's this conjecture that everybody's using this stuff. Well, I'm with the chief. That is not true. I'm sure there is a small population in my county that is using it, but that population is very small, and who's really using it, who's going in and out of the stores as we pay attention to it, is our young adults. I don't see a lot of 40 and 50 and 60-year-old people walking into those shops. I do see a lot of teenagers up to, say, 25 years old going in and out of those shops on a routine basis. And I want to say this, and I think it's very important. On every hearing that the Sheriff's Association has been involved in at THC, we have been very outspoken that we completely support the expansion of the Teacup program. And we have no problem with Teacup even being expanded more than what you all have done this last legislature. There is a huge difference between somebody who's going to self-medicate on buying something that they can't, and we know for a fact you cannot trust what is on those packages, versus the Teacup program that is scientifically and laboratory designed products that are designed for people to use for medication. So please know, the sheriffs of Texas support the Teacup program, whether it's for the veterans or anybody else, cancer patients, epilepsy, we could go on. We support the use of THC for medical purposes. We do not support it for recreational purposes.
Thank you. I have a question about, so hemp, the definition of hemp is the Delta 9. So, but the Delta 8, Delta 10, Delta LMNOP, they all give some sort of intoxicating effects, correct? I mean, do all those need to be
Yes.
added to the?
Well, this is, we have controlled dosage studies, all of these things around Delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol. We really have very little controlled information around all the other things. Anecdotally, they sure look like they do, yeah. But I can't say from like a clinical perspective, this is part of our challenge with it. And yeah, there are a lot of them. There is a lot of debate about what is naturally occurring in the plant, what is fabricated outside of the plant, what is added back to the plant. Some of them clearly have to be completely laboratory synthesized. But it's wildly complicated. I mean, it is literally at least 100 phytocannabinoids, of which we understand one.
And legally test for one, or legally prosecute for one.
The definition is based around Delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol
Not
exclusively.
acid, et cetera.
Right.
Right. Thank you so much.
Representative Frank?
Just two quick questions, for what I hope are quick questions and fairly quick answers. Currently, the problems we're having is not based on what is legal. It is based on what is illegal, based on what I've heard in testimony, right? It's not the less than 3%. It's not hemp. That's not the problem. The problem is people selling stuff that is currently illegal and we're not able to, for whatever reason, prosecute. Is that correct?
Correct, and then the other side of that answer is we're finding none that is below 0.3.
Okay, so if HB 5 were in effect, now it's illegal. It's already illegal. Now it's illegal. What's going to change? Like, you know what I mean? Like, making something illegal doesn't stop it. Will this stop? Would it actually stop what's going on in some of these places? Or it's just illegal and we're going to change the label to say, hey, this has no THC, but it really does have a bunch of THC, and then...
It's a great question. It'll absolutely get 95 to 100% better, and here's why. There's no longer a 0.3% bright line. So if all THC is illegal, then again, it's simple to test.
It's really just the simple testing will make it...
And quite frankly, a lot of these stores, at least in my city, they were just going to voluntarily go out of business because they know that most of their products are above 0.3. Some of them would have tested us, but that's the big game changer.
So it really is just that simple, which I thought that's what we were saying. I was just trying to clarify. So the second thing, this HB 5 is, as written, is pretty broad and affects a lot of different, there are other ways that people get THC. One of them is the drinkables, which I haven't heard anybody. Is that a problem or is that a separate issue?
It's a newer form of ingestible. They're out there. What I would encourage you to think about, don't think about the method of ingestion. Just think about the THC concentration.
Right.
Studies are still ongoing as to how the THC beverage, when infused with alcohol, changes the intoxication rate or effect. That's emerging, but I would just say, we're often asked, well, can we ban everything but the beverages? Well, THC is THC is THC, so we would say absolutely not, because you're still offering a product that's going to cause intoxication that's already illegal.
Okay, but the problem y'all have repeatedly said is not the THC itself, it's the intensity and the lack of accurate labeling that is the problem.
Yes, sir.
Meaning if it was the less than 3%, you'd be fine, but it's the fact that it's never less than 3%, and it's so easy to cheat the system, it's so hard to prosecute, all of that stuff.
Very well said. And a good thing to remember, less than 0.3 is non-psychoactive, which means it's non-intoxicating. When you get over 0.3, it becomes psychoactive and intoxicating. But what you just said, sir, is very well put.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Alcott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Stout, I have a question for you.
Uh-oh.
I would I think it's a safe bet to say that everyone here on the dais is okay with CBD and CBG because of its anti-inflammatory effects. It doesn't, it's not intoxicating. On page 4 of HB 5, under section 443.106, it claims that a license holder may not manufacture a consumable hemp product that contains any amount of cannabinoid other than cannabidiol or cannabigerol. When it says no amount, I mean, whether we're talking about trace or no amount, if you're going to purify some of this from the hemp plant and your purpose is legitimate to try to just produce some CBD for its anti-inflammatory effect, when we put something in here as strict as saying no amount, do you think it's, I mean, are your tests going to pick up? Because it'd be hard for me to believe that you're not going to get trace amounts.
Yep.
Of course, that's a relative term,
yes.
trace amounts of the delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol. So would your test, I mean, from your experience, have you ever tested something that was supposed to be just pure CBD, and is this could be a potential problem?
You are hitting on one of the cruxes in here that is a real challenge, and I get from a manufacturer standpoint, that's gonna be a challenge.
Yes. So do you have any recommendation? Would you be able to recommend to us like a level or a percentage that would make, you know, and taking into account the type of testing that you have today, that it would?
That is a really tough thing to try and give you a number on that, because once I start giving you a number, we start backing into all the problems that they've got. It's kind of why the Controlled Substance Act was originally set up to deal with it the way it is, that any amount is controlled. I guess the best I could say out of that is some mechanism of some standardization of testing so that there is at least a known detection limit that manufacturers.
And that's what I'm asking about. What is that detection limit? Because
right now,
I think I'm going to have a hard time wanting to pass a bill that actually prevents Granny from putting on her cream that helps her with her arthritis.
Right. And I fully understand that. I mean, this is part of the tragedy of the whole thing. Is there appear to be some really legitimate uses of these things that are getting basically hijacked by people wanting to shove Delta 8 and everything. But I think that the best I can say is it's going to be really tough to write that into legislation of a number without unintended consequences. Putting into legislation a mechanism for lab nerds to talk with industry nerds about coming to a reasonable limit of detection that doesn't create an impossible product, but also doesn't stick us with an impossible cost is about the best you're going to be able to hit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just still surprised that you wouldn't be able to give us a number. I mean, we've come up with 0.3%.
Well, I can tell you.
Coming up, that gives you a high.
I can tell you that my testing typically in, the kind of forensic testing, what we're going to do is probably going to be in about the tens of part per billion kind of sensitivity range.
And that's very sensitive.
That's quite sensitive, and it probably is going to be eliminating products like you're
That's my
talking
concern.
about.
And I think we really need your help. I mean, I don't know if anyone else could help us better than you on something like that.
Well, Representative, that is, any number is a slippery slope.
Right.
You're going to get us back into where we're at now. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that language should mimic Senate Bill 5, which protects FDA-approved THC products, both over-the-counter and prescription, and it protects hemp seed oils, proteins, and lotions. So I believe that is protected in HB 5. Again, I could be mistaken.
Well, I'm reading straight from the bill.
Okay,
So
then
basically, it is a consumable.
So that's how we tried to work on that wording, because when we studied this, the number will get us back into the same situation. So we tried to think, okay, if it's FDA-approved THC, that means it's gone through a medical review, or if it's in the hemp seed oils, lotions, and would be part of that. So I think that's how we tried to solve it. I think we would be okay on a practitioner side, certainly.
But I mean, you're right. I mean, this is a slippery spot that is really difficult, and I wish I had an easy answer for you. I really don't.
Representative Schofield.
Thank you. I had one question, but now Mr. Alcott gave me a second. I had somebody come into my office, and I asked them the trace amount question, and they said in manufacturing you could separate out CBD and CBG. So that that person may testify later today and explain how that's possible in the manufacturing process. But again, if you put a number in, as the chief said, you're right back where you are. Any number above 0 means I can have 77%, have it on the shelf, and nobody's gonna know by looking at the package. The better way of crafting the legislation, and I do believe it is in here, is that any of the FDA-approved products, any of those things, they're a safe harbor. So should there be, some trace amount of some other cannabinoid that is in the cream because you just can't separate out any better than that, they're covered if they're.
Yes, sir.
But my question was in a similar vein regarding what we test for and how we know. Even in our bill, the bill that we have before us today, when you do the testing and all of that, if you're a Texas manufacturer, we have sort of more ability to control than if this stuff comes in from St. Louis, where they're not going to have abided by our testing protocols during their manufacturing process. How do we, even if this ban bill passes, how do we go about when everything, whatever's on the shelves, how do we go about knowing stuff from St. Louis or other places meets our standards? And to what extent are you relying on what I agree is likely too? If you make it illegal, it's not going to be on the shelves of the convenience stores anymore.
Yeah, I think the shelves go away. People aren't going to walk into a store and buy something that doesn't get them high for the most part, right? I don't want to, say in every case, but it's going to be a supply and demand issue. We're seeing most of the products imported into Texas from California and Colorado. They're not going to want to risk, if we have a ban, pushing those products in, certainly at the frequency and the volume. So organically, you supporting a ban once again in the House, if we can get that into law, that's 95% of the heavy lifting for us, because it'll be a supply and demand. They're not going to risk it. These producers wouldn't risk it. And again, it just makes the number of stores finally manageable for us. And then the other thing that we would certainly want to do at some point, doesn't have to be now, but we want to standardize testing protocol, because the hemp industry is definitely relying on liquid testing of hemp versus the gas testing that we're doing at the labs. And that would be some other cleanup that would, again, empower chiefs to be able to test without, worrying about being sued civilly. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yeah, and again, going back to Mr. Alcott's, there's been a lot of scientist-level discussion this morning from a lawyer-level discussion, and we're going to have a panel of prosecutors. If there are literally just trace amounts of something in there that isn't going to get anybody high and it's not going to be, we don't prosecute now based on people who are actually selling bad stuff. Nobody's getting prosecuted because there's 0.00001 of some other cannabinoid in a CBG cream.
Correct.
That just isn't ever going to happen.
Correct.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you, Chairman. Two last questions for law enforcement. Sheriff Hawthorne, you mentioned THC-induced psychosis.
Yes, ma'am.
Was that plant-derived or synthetic?
Well, I guess we'll never really know, or from a sheriff's perspective, I don't know. I see what's taking place in the jail, and if you were to interview, and I also sit on my local mental health authority board of directors, and I will tell you that when you start talking to people, and especially in counseling scenarios, you learn that most of what they've been dealing with have been THC, probably from edibles, not realizing what is in that gummy that they have consumed or the strength that is in that gummy. But it's at the same time, these, we'll call them cigarettes, but from a law enforcement perspective, my deputies will call them it's a blunt that you can literally buy, that it's a cigar that essentially has what you and I, or some of these gentlemen that are the same generation as me, would know as hash oil, right down the middle of it. And you can buy them all day long. I could leave here, and in 10 minutes I could probably have a blunt in my hand that the THC in that is so high and so powerful that's where this THC psychosis that we're dealing with. And I know you're going to have some mothers that are going to speak at this table, And I will tell you, their issues are real. They are real. We're seeing them in our jail. We're seeing them in our schools. The concerns and the reasons that law enforcement is here for a ban are real. And I appreciate, Chairman, for you allowing this hearing. And I'm proud that it's in public health, because it's really where it needs to be. This is a public health issue.
No, I agree. I'm glad it's here also. I'm kind of frustrated we didn't get to hear the testimony during the regular session, which brings me to my final question for law enforcement. The House did pass a ban, and I'm sure everyone is aware the House is kind of in the middle here of what we're going to do as a state. So in that vein, I would like to know, Chief Dye, you mentioned that you've studied regulation and it doesn't work, and I heard you say that it creates more stores. And some of the proposed legislation that I've been reading on regulation does the opposite. So I'm kind of curious to see where you think that more stores would pop up with regulation.
Yes, absolutely. So let's start with the fact that the hemp industry that's currently selling illegal products is a big proponent of regulation in the other bills. Let's start there. Regulation does legalize the product, but it requires proper levels of enforcement. So what we realize very quickly, you'll never be able to hire enough people. TABC would likely be tasked with this. We can't even get them out when we need them on bar checks because they're so overwhelmed. They have 60,000 plus, and I think we have one in our area, right? So that the personnel, and then again, look at your police departments. Many are carrying vacancies. We're almost always going to pay higher than the TABC agents would make in a lot of areas, not all. So there's a personnel issue. You're not going to just be able to create these people, and then you're going to have to train them. And then the testing, as we've talked a lot about, we really studied, okay, DPS labs will not be an option for quantitative testing. And at $500 to $600 a test, you can give us millions and millions of dollars every year, and it's not going to be enough. So it will lead to apathy. The police departments will just have to go on to something else because we will not have these resources. And think about this. What else has happened to us in the last 6 years? Fentanyl. We're trying to deal with fentanyl, you know, and now we got this. So, ma'am, I can tell you, you all have brought really the great points out about regulation. I highlighted some in my words, but you're verifying or you're validating with your questions the thing that we came up about. To Representative Alcott's point, well, can we do a lower number for the, you know, the therapeutic products? But any number will continue to be exploited because they've shown over the last 6 years they don't care about what the law says. They're going to sell mainly products to get people high. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, and I just want to end with, for the purposes of the committee, and the real-world situation that we're in today, with regards to the ban versus regulation. For law enforcement here, are you opposed to age gating, banning synthetics, and local control if we can't do a ban?
Well, it won't. Our opinion at TPCA, it won't work. Age gating hasn't worked in, you know, other industries, number one. Again, we're going to get right back into the boat we're at, and I do find it a little ironic that the state, and I have no problem with this, actually I agree with it, the state doesn't want cities going out and doing their own thing. Let's take marijuana. You've got some cities that have basically decriminalized marijuana, and the state is not happy with that, nor are we, because the penal code is the penal code is the penal code. But now all of a sudden, it feels like it's deferring a tough decision to local authority. I think what's good for one Texan is good for all Texans. And the sheriff said it, we're glad it's in public health. You've got a significant public health crisis that we can help avert at this moment in time. And again, doing this 41 years, look, not every marijuana user goes on to use heavy drugs. But I can tell you, because I've arrested many, many, many heavy drug users, I don't remember one that didn't start with marijuana. So why would we knowingly open this up again to a relatively small level of customers wanting to get high and spend all this time and money and resources that we don't have to currently take care of our core responsibilities, mental health, all of the other social issues that we're already dealing with. And then, you know, now there's new products that are even more deadly than fentanyl. That's come in now. So it's just, why would we do this to ourselves? It makes no sense. Thank you.
Sheriff?
Well, I absolutely agree with the chief on that statement. I can't come up with a reason myself why I want my grandkids to be, I have deputies in the schools, and the deputies will tell you that it never fails. What they find in the bathroom of the junior highs and the high schools are issues that are all THC surrounding. That's whether it's vaping, whether it's edibles, whether it's cookies. And we already have an alleged age requirement to buy these things. We haven't changed anything. But the only way I know that we're going to reduce the amount, because we're all smart enough to know we're not going to stop it, but the only way I know that we're going to reduce it is to go to a ban in which law enforcement can easily enforce it, laboratories can easily analyze it, and prosecutors can easily prosecute it.
So given the testimony, Chief Dive, you think it would get worse, essentially. So is your position that you'd rather either have a ban or nothing at all?
Yes, ma'am. I mean, I would hate to remain status quo, because I think we have a real pivotal moment and opportunity here to do the right thing. But we would be better off with status quo, because when you regulate, you're going to actually empower the industry to expand, because they've seen what regulation did with alcohol and tobacco. And trust me, if we regulate as a state, enforcement will go to zero. And in 5 years, you're going to have many more stores. The only reason you wouldn't have a store on every corner is because they've still got to make money, right? But everywhere that they can make money, they're going to go. So we believe that absolutely the number of stores would increase under regulation.
But under the current status quo, you've got 15-year-olds that can walk into a store and buy something. You wouldn't want to at least try to stop that until we have an opportunity to do more?
Ma'am, with all due respect, I think once you regulate, the genie's out of the bottle. And so what we would do is, over the next 2 years, more validated medical research is going to come out about the harmful effects of these products. That's in our favor. And then what we would do, and we would work with you all on some other things to try to increase the enforcement. For one, we've got to stop allowing chiefs to get sued every time they go after this industry. And I think there are some things that we would do. So in 27, I can promise you we're going to be right back in front of you asking you for a ban. We'll just have even more evidence. But in that 2-year period, how many families are going to be ruined from these products? I mean, think about that. Think of the damage this is going to do to families, particularly with their young people, over the next 2 years if we wait. So now's the time. And I think we can send another ban bill to the governor's desk with thoughtfully discerned by a lot of really smart people that took time to understand the facts of these harmful products, and really have the opportunity to really limit the damage now.
I think you're right. I think what we're doing here in public health is we are on this fact-finding mission, and I would argue that the genie was let out of the bottle back in 2019, and we're trying to figure out how to put it back in.
I totally agree.
And I'll do everything I can to help figure this situation out too. So I appreciate you all for being here again, and I know we've got other people, so I'll wrap it up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any other questions of this panel? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you all for your thoughtful questions and your
Absolutely.
time. We appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Thank you for being here. Okay, members, our next panel is all going to be joining us virtually. So Chair calls Early Wiley, David Holmes, and Greg Willis.